Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio. Today we're still discussing the 1997 murder of Billie-Jo Jenkins. I've made 3 parts so far to this podcast, but I just wanted to go over some kind of new developments that I find as I have been going through the information. What I really like to do is I kind of like to go make these uploads while I am researching and while I am going through all the articles and the videos and the forums, because I think it provides a sort of different type of effect. Most people give the presentation, at the end, but I like to sort of also share the steps along the way when you're looking into a case. Now, when it comes to the case of Billie-Jo Jenkins, there are pretty much 2 possibilities, and they're going to sound very, very flimsy, but one is that she was murdered by her stepfather, Shawn Jenkins, and the second is that she was murdered by someone that you would call an intruder, a prowler, somebody who was not supposed to be in the house. Now, I was really leaning toward the whole notion that this could have been Shawn Jenkins, and I was even thinking about that this morning, but while I was reading through some of the articles that have been written about the case, one is by a place called The Argus. That's Argus. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Maybe it's The Argus or something, but I just assume it's called The Argus. And the other is from Scotsman.com. And the one from Scotsman.com, I really have to say, is very, very detailed. Now, one of the things about it is it goes into, well, it's argumentative. It's arguing that Shawn Jenkins is innocent. And there actually has been a very large campaign in the United Kingdom, I believe which is called Justice for Shawn Jenkins, really trying to say that he was innocent. When you watch him in interviews, like on Trevor McDonald, he comes across as somebody who is disingenuous, dishonest, shady, sketchy, kind of along those lines. But what we really find about the article on Scotsman.com is Shawn has been accused of physical abuse from both his wife and his daughters. And there's even one account that has been said on almost all of the YouTube videos I saw on this, that Shawn struck his wife and perforated her eardrum. Like they're trying to use that as an example of Shawn's violent past. Well, what this article on Scotsman.com talks about is, it actually says that, it kind of confirms something that Shawn said in the interview with Trevor McDonald, where he said that, no, he didn't hit his wife. She had a problem with her eardrum because of an infection. According to this article, it states that they contacted the hospital and went through, they were able to obtain the records. I'm not sure how, but it says they were able to obtain the records, and it was Shawn himself who went to the hospital with a perforated eardrum. He was playing around with their daughter Esther Jenkins, and Shawn was the one who was struck on the side of the head with something, and he went to the hospital with a perforated eardrum, and that would kind of confirm the statement that Shawn made, that his wife Lois Jenkins just had an ear infection, and that, okay, maybe we can see some things that are kind of shady about Shawn, but it's starting to sound like Lois Jenkins is rather bizarre herself. And we actually have another thing here on Scotsman.com where it says, headlines blinding like headlights. Murderer, liar, wife beater, and adulterer. That's what they were trying to do to Shawn. And, I'm not saying that I know 100%, but this is sort of the stance that Shawn has been taking the whole time, where it's like people needed someone to vilify for the murder of Billie-Jo. They needed a villain. And, he is a very bizarre individual. However, it really feels like what he's trying to say is they just needed someone that they could blame as the murderer, the liar, and the wife beater. But that still doesn't take away the fact that his daughters did confirm the physical abuse. One of the big things else that we have to talk about in this upload is the blood evidence. Shawn is no longer with Lois, of course. They moved the family to Australia, but Shawn has remarried to someone named Tina, and this is probably the single most fascinating part of the article, because what it says is, Tina wrote him a very short letter in prison that was only 4 lines long, and it's like, basically she was saying that she is a nurse, and she does not believe that Shawn could have killed Billie-Jo with so little blood on him. Let's talk about the blood evidence for a second, because it's like, there were 158 micro droplets, if you want to call them that, and they were actually located not only on Shawn's fleece, but also on the corner of his pant leg. And some people are suggesting that that is indicative that he was, of what he sort of said, that he picked up Billie-Jo off the floor and tried to turn her over, and that would have been, coming into contact with him. Like, that's enough contact to produce a sort of blood mist of this nature. I'm not saying I know 100%, but one of the absolute most fascinating things about this piece is, what they are insinuating is, if Shawn had been the murderer, if he had been striking someone with a 18-inch metal 10 spike, then there would have been blood mist on the back of his shirt, or like on the back of the fleece, and the back of his pants even. There should have been blood mist on the backside. And all the blood particles, micro droplets, we said we call them that, all the micro droplets were found on the front of Shawn's clothing. Because as he would raise up the bloody metal iron spike, the blood mist should have transferred to the back of his fleece, but it didn't happen that way. Well, I'm not saying that this is absolute perfect evidence, but this is definitely something to think about. As I mentioned, though, this is an argumentative piece. This is trying to argue for Shawn's innocence, but that is a very big supporting thing. But just with any argumentative piece of writing, they're only going to give, the side that they believe is correct. One of the strangest things, though, I have to say about this is, I haven't really talked about this much, but Shawn claims that he saw somebody in his hallway whom he believed was a plainclothes officer. Now, what it says here is, Sion Jenkins spoke to someone he thought was a plainclothes officer in his hall. This is mentioned in his original statement. Many details were challenged, but police never questioned Jenkins about this man. While preparing for the third trial, Shawn realized there was no witness statement for him. Inquiries confirmed that there was no plainclothes officer. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I really have no comment on that, but that's sort of what Shawn has been going at from the very beginning, is that he thought there was a plainclothes officer on site, but yeah, I don't know what to say about that. It's just that's what Shawn's side of the story is. I would have to say, though, that the blood evidence thing is something that we've always dealt with, because I did a couple episodes about playing devil's advocate for and against Sion Jenkins' guilt and innocence. But one of the big things about it is it physically possible that someone could have committed a murder in this 3-minute window? Yes. Is it possible that he could have done something like wash his hands and return back to the car with not any blood evidence, visible blood evidence on his shirt? Bear in mind that all of the micro droplets are microscopic. They could not be seen with the human eye, but they are only on the front side of his clothing. Does that suggest more that this guy found his daughter on the ground and he picked her up, turned her over, and that's when the blood mist was exhaled? I said in, I think, all the uploads that there were fragments of bone in the blood mist that were also on the fleece, but if she had received severe skull fractures, blood is something flowing, right? it is definitely going to flow to different parts of the body, the mouth, the lip areas. It gets all mixed up, and, people in, blood is something that flows out, right, and it spreads all over. I don't think there's anything really to look into about that there were also bone fragments on his fleece. I don't think that is anything definitive either way. I think that's perfectly normal. But one of the big things that they have said is, we're talking, he bludgeoned a woman to death, and he only had 158 micro droplets on his clothes. Should there have been more? Well, Tina, the nurse, and now his current wife, says yes, and they bring up that point about, there should also be blood mist on the back of his fleece, because, if he were raising a metal spike in the air, then it should have transferred to the back, or at least, the collar region, but all of these droplets are on the front of the fleece. It's just sort of a real shame that there is this, whole notion of the plainclothes officer in the house, and they don't know who that person is. That's just something so bizarre. I wouldn't even be able to argue for and against, because I don't quite comprehend. I don't comprehend that statement enough. It's like, all we really have is that Shawn saw somebody in the house, a man wearing a suit, like, a smartly dressed suit. That's all we really have. I can't even comment any more on that. It's because the police can't really corroborate it, and it wasn't until the third trial that Shawn realized that this person, whom he thought was an officer, never gave any sort of statement. Someone who was at the scene never gave any statements, but what Shawn is insinuating is that this was not the M25 rapist, this was not a mentally deranged individual, this was, just a different murderer altogether. Billie-Jo was left at home alone, though, and they were also in a very high crime area. They were installing security lights. Billie-Jo was painting the patio doors because supposedly there had been an attempted break-in. Well, what do you think about the blood evidence thing that I have mentioned and put forward? Do you think there is any possibility that this confirms that Sion Jenkins is innocent? And I'm going to post a link to this article from Scotsman.com, and that's all I can really say about that for now. Until next time, talk to you soon.